My name is Marcus Webb, and I suppose I should start by explaining what an aggression index is, since it's become something of a galactic obsession these days. Picture, if you will, a vast cosmic database where every known species in the galaxy is cataloged and ranked according to their propensity for violence, warfare, and general hostility. The Zephyrians, with their tendency to solve disputes through elaborate dance battles, score a modest 2.3. The crystalline Vorthon collective, who communicate exclusively through color changes and haven't engaged in warfare for over 3 millennia, register at an impressive 0.1. And then there are humans, sitting comfortably at the top of the scale with a staggering 97.8 out of 100. Now you might think this would make us the most feared species in the galaxy. You'd be wrong, but more on that later. I should set the scene properly. The year is 2387 and humanity has been part of the Galactic Alliance for exactly 47 years, 3 months and 12 days. Not that anyone's counting, except for the Alliance bureaucrats who love their statistics almost as much as they love their 1,000-page regulatory documents, written in 17 different languages, 6 of which don't use sounds, but rather emit specific pheromones. I'm what you might generously call a xenosociologist. Though the humans at the embassy prefer alien relations specialist. And the aliens themselves call me that strange biped who asks too many questions and doesn't understand proper membrane etiquette. My job involves documenting interactions between species, analyzing communication patterns, and occasionally preventing interspecies incidents that might result in someone getting fleeced, literally, in the case of the Woolen Confederation. The thing about humans and our impressive aggression index score is that most galactic species misunderstand what it means. They see 97.8 and imagine unstoppable war machines, apocalyptic weapons, and civilizations built on conquest. They're not entirely wrong, mind you. We did manage to have 2 world wars, several genocides, and enough smaller conflicts to fill several detailed historical databases. But what they don't understand is that our aggression isn't just about destruction, it's about innovation, adaptation, and finding the most creatively unexpected solutions to problems. Which brings me to Thursday. Thursdays are typically quiet at the embassy. The Meridian Council holds their weekly contemplative silence sessions. The hive mind collectives synchronize their thoughts, and most civilized species engage in what they consider important cultural activities. For humans, this usually means catching up on paperwork, complaining about the coffee quality, and placing bets on which species will attempt to submit a formal complaint about human aggressive music this week. It was during one such mundane Thursday that Junior Attaché Rebecca Martinez burst into my office. Her usually immaculate uniform wrinkled, and her expression conveying that particular mix of excitement and terror that humans get when something monumentally interesting is about to happen. "Marcus, we've got a situation," she said, breath coming in short gasps. "The Xerxan Empire just declared their intention to invade Earth." I paused mid-sip of my coffee, which was incidentally terrible as always. "Come again." 3 hours ago, a Xerxan battle fleet entered the Sol system. They've transmitted their standard ultimatum surrender within 72 hours, or face total annihilation. She handed me a data pad. But here's the weird part. They've already started jamming all standard communication frequencies. They don't want us calling for help. The Xerxan Empire Quadrant 7's answer to inevitable galactic domination. Picture a race that looks like someone crossed a mechanical spider with an aggressive bureaucrat, gave them a technology level about 3 centuries ahead of humanity, and a cultural obsession with efficiency that makes German engineering look lackadaisical. They'd conquered 47 star systems in the past century, each victory swift, decisive, and thoroughly documented in triplicate. Their aggression index: a respectable 76.4. High enough to be taken seriously, but not high enough to warrant major concern from most Alliance members. After all, they followed the standard invasion protocols: appear, demand, surrender, demonstrate superior firepower, accept submission, implement efficient governance. What made this situation unusual was their target. Humans weren't exactly a priority for most conquering civilizations. Sure, we had a decent military, some interesting technology, and apparently the best chocolate in 3 spiral arms. A point of pride we'd never fully understood. But we were hardly the type of strategic prize that justified a major military campaign. How many ships? I asked, scrolling through the initial reports. Preliminary scans show approximately 500 vessels. Battlecruisers support craft and what appears to be a command dreadnought the size of Manhattan. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. In galactic terms, 500 ships represented a serious commitment. The Xerxans typically conquered entire systems with fewer than 100 vessels. They were apparently taking humanity very seriously indeed. Have you informed the Alliance Council? First priority, but you know how they are. They're calling for an emergency session to discuss the implications of aggressive action against a member species. That's scheduled for next Wednesday. Next Wednesday. The invasion would be over by Tuesday. Right? And Earth's response? Rebecca's expression shifted slightly. That's where things get interesting. The president's called a cabinet meeting. The generals are having heated discussions, and apparently someone's activated something called Project Dead Horse. I'd never heard of Project Dead Horse, which either meant it was highly classified, or someone in the military had watched too many pre-war films. Given the human military's tendency toward colorful code names, it could have been either. What about evacuation protocols? Strangely, no. No general evacuation orders, no panic broadcasts. The official statement is simply, Earth extends diplomatic greetings to the Xerxan Empire and looks forward to meaningful dialogue. This was odd. Human governments weren't known for their restraint when faced with existential threats. Our history was filled with dramatic last stands, stirring speeches, and spectacular going down in flames moments. Diplomatic greetings in the face of invasion weren't exactly our style. Over the next 18 hours, things got progressively stranger. The Xerxan fleet had taken position in a standard siege formation around Earth, but something was off. My contacts in the Alliance intelligence community, a polite term for gossipy aliens who worked in information services, reported unusual communication patterns from the fleet. Instead of the typical invasion preparation protocols, the Xerxans seemed to be running extensive scans and diagnostics on their own systems. Meanwhile, Earth's preparations seemed almost deliberately mundane. Military satellites remained in standard positions. No planetary shields were activated, and the most notable activity was a sudden increase in international internet traffic that seemed focused on what military intelligence described as recreational computing activities. By Friday morning, I'd received no fewer than 17 interview requests from various galactic news services, all wanting the human perspective on the impending cultural extinction event. The Meridian Council had sent formal condolences for humanity's forthcoming transition to a higher state of non-corporeal existence. Their polite way of saying everyone would be dead, and the hive mind collectives had offered to preserve human consciousness in their shared memory banks, which was generous, if slightly unsettling. It was during my 5th interview with a Zephyrian journalist whose questions had to be translated through interpretive dance that Rebecca found me again. The fleet stopped moving, she announced without preamble. Stopped moving how? Dead in space, all 500 ships. They're just floating there. I excused myself from the interview, leaving the Zephyrian still mid-pirouette in a movement that apparently asked about humanity's cultural legacy through creative destruction. The Alliance monitoring station's situation room was buzzing with activity. Holographic displays showed the Xerxan fleet in perfect formation, but every ship's energy signature had gone dark. The massive dreadnought that had been broadcasting threatening messages every 6 hours had been silent for 14 hours and 37 minutes. Any idea what happened? I asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief technology analyst. She shook her head, her expression somewhere between baffled and amused. We're detecting no weapons fire, no energy weapons discharge, no signs of battle whatsoever. It's like someone flipped a switch and everything just stopped. What about their communications? That's the really interesting part. She pulled up a series of signal analyses. About 6 hours ago, we detected a burst of activity from Earth. Nothing directed at the fleet specifically, just a general broadcast across all frequencies. Standard digital traffic, nothing unusual. Then, approximately 3 minutes later, you've seen every ship in the Xerxan fleet began exhibiting system failures. I studied the data. The pattern was bizarre. The system failures weren't random. They were spreading through each ship in a specific sequence, moving from one subsystem to another with almost mechanical precision. It's like a virus, Dr. Kim continued, but not biological, obviously. Something that's propagating through their computer systems. A computer virus. The phrase triggered something in my memory, a conversation I'd had with a human programmist months earlier about theoretical cyber warfare. But that had been purely academic. No one had ever actually weaponized. Dr. Kim, what exactly did Earth broadcast? She looked puzzled. Just normal traffic. Messages, data transfers, some kind of image file that went to every Alliance member. Why? I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Can you show me the image? It took her a few minutes to isolate the file. When it appeared on the main display, I stared at it for a full 30 seconds before starting to laugh. Not the polite chuckle expected in professional settings, but genuine, uncontrollable laughter that made several Alliance personnel uncomfortable and caused one Gellerite diplomat to defensively spread its defensive spines. The image was simple: a cartoon cat drawn in deliberately crude lines with text above and below in standard Earth human letters. The top read, "Icon has cheeseburger." The bottom, "But not your space empire." It's a meme, Mum, I explained when I'd regained enough composure to speak. A human cultural artifact, usually humorous, often featuring cats and traditionally used for social commentary or entertainment. Dr. Kim looked at me as if I'd suggested the image was actually a highly advanced piece of military technology, which it turned out it was. Over the next 6 hours, as reports came in from the paralyzed fleet, the full scope of what humanity had done became clear. The innocent-looking image file contained what military specialists would later call the most elegantly vicious piece of code in galactic history. It worked like this. The image file, when viewed on any standard galactic computer system, appeared completely harmless. Every scanner, every security protocol, every defensive measure identified it as exactly what it seemed, a simple picture with text. But embedded within the image's digital structure, woven into the very pixels in a way that was invisible to conventional analysis, was something remarkable. The code didn't attack systems directly. Instead, it observed. It learned. It quietly mapped every system it encountered, identifying security protocols, command structures, and operational parameters. Then, and this was the brilliant part, it waited until it had gathered enough information to perfectly mimic the system's own protocols. Once integrated, the virus didn't destroy systems, it took control of them. Every Xerxan ship found their computers responding to commands that came from within their own systems, but weren't issued by any Xerxan officer. Weapons systems refused to fire. Navigation computers locked onto new coordinates. Communication arrays broadcast messages that no one had inputted. The takeover was so complete that the Xerxan crews couldn't even understand what was happening. From their perspective, their own computers had simply stopped obeying them and started following some invisible agenda. But the most psychologically devastating part was the messages the virus began broadcasting from each ship. Not threats, not demands, not even gloating, just cats. Thousands of different images of cats with increasingly absurd captions flooding every communication channel. Cats wearing tiny military uniforms. Cats operating spaceships. Cats declaring themselves Admiral Whiskers and demanding tribute in the form of space fish. The commander of the Xerxan fleet, Admiral Zarthak, whose name in human languages requires several throat exercises and sounds like someone clearing their sinuses, aggressively transmitted a formal complaint to the Alliance Council within hours. The complaint, however, was interrupted every 30 seconds by automated messages featuring animated cats purring loudly and demanding attention. By Sunday, the situation had reached peak absurdity. The entire Xerxan fleet remained completely immobilized, their crews unable to regain control of their ships, while Earth's response remained officially limited to extending continued diplomatic greetings and hoping this minor technical difficulty can be resolved amicably. Three things happened simultaneously that afternoon that elevated the situation from bizarre to legendary. First, the Xerxan Empire formally requested assistance from the Alliance Council in resolving the technical difficulties currently affecting our diplomatic mission to Earth. Second, every major galactic news network began broadcasting stories about the meme war, as it was quickly dubbed, with particular focus on interviews with various military experts who were struggling to explain how humanity had neutralized a vastly superior force using what amounted to digital jokes. Third, and most significantly, Admiral Zarthak himself requested a face-to-face meeting with human representatives to discuss the terms of, concluding this unfortunate misunderstanding. I was selected as part of the human delegation, primarily because I was one of the few humans stationed locally who hadn't been caught on galactic broadcast feeds laughing uncontrollably at news reports. The meeting took place aboard the Alliance space station Harmony Point, a neutral facility that specialized in interspecies diplomacy and served coffee that was somehow even worse than what we had at the embassy. Admiral Zarthak arrived with a standard diplomatic entourage, though their carefully maintained military dignity was somewhat undermined by the fact that every time they tried to access their datapad's cat videos would automatically begin playing. The Admiral was an imposing figure, even by Xerxan standards. 7 feet tall with 4 articulated arms, ending in highly precise manipulator appendages, and a carapace that suggested thousands of years of evolutionary pressure to develop natural armor. Their eyes, compound and multifaceted, could process information at rates that made human computer systems look sluggish. And they were absolutely furious. "This is unprecedented," Zarthak began, their voice carrying the harmonic overtones that Xerxans used to express serious displeasure. "In 400 years of military operations, we have never encountered such effective resistance," suggested Ambassador Patricia Reynolds, the head of our delegation. Juvenile mockery disguised as military action. I noticed that one of the Xerxan aides was discreetly trying to prevent their datapad from displaying what appeared to be a gif of a cat wearing a tiny admiral's hat and saluting with its paw. "We came here operating under established galactic protocols," the Admiral continued. "Our intelligence indicated that humanity, despite its high aggression index rating, maintained military capabilities approximately 300 years behind our own. We expected conventional resistance battles, fleet engagements, perhaps a few clever strategic maneuvers. We did not expect memes," I offered helpfully. The words seemed to hit the Admiral like a physical blow. Their compound eyes flickered in what I'd learned to recognize as the Xerxan equivalent of incredulous rage. "We are a civilized species. We follow the established conventions of warfare. There are protocols, procedures, a proper sequence of events that allows both sides to maintain dignity while determining superior force. And you sent us pictures of felines." Ambassador Reynolds nodded sympathetically. "Yes, we did, and they worked quite effectively." "But why?" This came from one of the other Xerxan officers who seemed genuinely confused rather than angry. "Our intelligence analyses indicated that humans typically respond to existential threats with conventional military resistance. Your species has a documented history of fighting superior forces using technological innovation, tactical brilliance, and sheer determination. Why resort to this It was a fair question, and one that I'd been pondering myself. The truth was, most humans hadn't even been informed about the invasion until after it was effectively over. The whole operation had been conducted by a small group of specialists, working out of a basement somewhere in Geneva, while the rest of humanity continued their daily activities, largely unaware that civilization had been saved by programists with too much free time and a questionable sense of humor. "You're thinking about this wrong," Ambassador Reynolds explained. "You analyzed our military capabilities, our technology levels, our strategic doctrines. But you didn't consider our cultural weapons." "Cultural weapons?" Admiral Zarthak's harmonics conveyed deep skepticism. "Human civilization is built around shared information systems," I added. "Our internet, our social networks, our entertainment media. The virus wasn't just a computer program, it was a cultural artifact that exploited a fundamental vulnerability in your systems." "What vulnerability?" asked the confused officer. "You're logical," Reynolds said simply. "Your species has spent millennia optimizing systems for efficiency and logical operation. You've created computer systems that think like you do, rationally, systematically, predictably. But human systems are designed to handle chaos, randomness, and constant streams of data that serve no apparent logical purpose." I pulled up a standard human internet session on the room's display system. The screen immediately filled with a bewildering cascade of information news articles, social media posts, videos of people doing improbably stupid things, advertisements for products that may or may not exist, memes, political arguments, cats. Our technology is built to handle millions of humans simultaneously sharing thoughts, jokes, complaints, and pictures of their food. Systems that can process this chaos as normal data can certainly handle the logic-based systems of other species. The Xerxes studied the display with what appeared to be growing horror. You live in this?" asked one. "We call it Tuesday," Reynolds replied cheerfully. Admiral Zarthak made a sound that the translation systems rendered as something between a sigh and the noise a mechanical device makes when it needs servicing. "We have been outmaneuvered by chaos itself," they said finally. "Very well. What are your terms for resolving this situation?" And this was where things got truly interesting, because humanity's terms weren't what anyone expected. We didn't demand tribute territory or the dismantling of their fleet. We didn't insist on surrender apologies or reparations. Instead, our demands were simple. First, the Xerxes Empire would withdraw from the Sol system and formally recognize Earth as an independent system within the Alliance. Second, they would implement what we termed cultural exchange protocols, basically sharing meme meat, art, and entertainment across species boundaries to prevent future misunderstandings. Third, and most importantly, they would agree to something called the Humor Accord. "The Humor Accord?" Admiral Zarthak inquired. "A formal agreement," Reynolds explained, "that any future disagreements between our species will be resolved through increasingly creative meme warfare rather than conventional military action." I watched the Xerxian delegation process this information. You could practically see their collective minds trying to compute whether this was some form of elaborate psychological warfare, or whether humanity had genuinely replaced war with making jokes. "This is," the Admiral began, then stopped. "This is either the most sophisticated peace treaty in galactic history, or proof that your species is fundamentally damaged." "Why not both?" Reynolds suggested. After several hours of negotiation, the Humor Accord was signed. The ceremony itself was remarkably dignified, considering the circumstances. Both sides exchanged formal documents, complete with translation protocols and legal framework. Admiral Zarthak even managed to complete the ceremony without their datapad playing cat videos. The Xerxes fleet departed the Sol system 3 days later, their computers finally restored to normal operation. The virus had been designed with what our programists called a graceful degradation protocol. It would gradually relinquish control once its primary objectives were met. In the weeks that followed the story of the Mimi War, became something of a galactic sensation. Human diplomats found themselves in demand across the alliance, not for military consultation, but for cultural analysis. Apparently, our approach to conflict resolution was seen as either revolutionary or completely insane, depending on which species you asked. The Aggression Index rating for humanity was officially revised to include a new subcategory, creative aggression, with a note that traditional military threat assessments might not apply. We remained at 97.8, but now with an asterisk that essentially meant dangerous in ways we don't fully understand. 3 months later, I received a communication from Admiral Zarthak. It came through unofficial channels, a personal message, rather than a military or diplomatic one. The message was brief. Honored Ambassador Webb, I am writing to inform you that the Xerxan Military Academy has established a new course of study, Asymmetric Cultural Warfare. You may be interested to know that our cadets are now required to study human internet culture as part of their strategic training. They are also remarkably proficient at creating what you call reaction GIFs. I must confess that my understanding of warfare has been fundamentally altered by our encounter. We have faced species with superior technology, superior numbers, and superior strategic thinking, but you are the first species to weaponize laughter itself. I hope this finds you well. Also, I have attached what I believe humans call a meme that I created myself. My aides assure me it is totally fire, though I do not understand the relationship between quality and thermal combustion. With respect and profound confusion, Admiral Zarthak. The attachment was indeed a meme. It showed Admiral Zarthak himself in full military dress with the caption, "When your invasion fleet gets pwned by space cats." Above their image and below, maybe I should have just emailed first. I stared at it for a long moment, then did what any human would do. I shared it with everyone I knew, and within hours it had spread across the galactic network. The last I heard, it was the most popular meme in the Xerxan Empire. Looking back, I think that's what we learned from the whole experience: warfare aggression. Conflict, they're really just forms of communication that have gone terribly wrong. And sometimes, if you're creative enough, you can short-circuit the entire process by communicating more effectively than anyone expects. Humans didn't win the Mimi War because we were the most aggressive species in the galaxy. We won because we were the most creative species in the galaxy, and creativity, it turns out, is the ultimate weapon. Of course, that's not how the military history books record it. Official Alliance records list the conflict as the Xerxan Human Diplomatic Resolution of 2387, with detailed analysis of our innovative approach to conflict de-escalation. But everyone who was there knows the truth. We won a war with cat pictures, and somehow that makes perfect sense for humanity. The humor accord has been used 3 times since then by various species facing conflicts with humans. Each time, the resolution has involved increasingly elaborate meme competitions, absurd challenges, and creative solutions that no military strategist in their right mind would ever consider. The galaxy is a stranger, more wonderful place because of it. And yes, before you ask, Admiral Zarthak really has become quite good at making memes. Their work tends toward complex philosophical jokes that require advanced mathematics to understand the punchline, but they're getting surprisingly popular in certain intellectual circles. Sometimes I think we may have accidentally created the first interstellar culture based entirely on inside jokes, which honestly seems about right for humanity. As for me, I've been promoted to Senior Cultural Combat Analyst, a position that didn't exist before the Mimi War and still doesn't make sense to most of the galaxy. My job now involves monitoring potential conflicts and determining whether they can be resolved through competitive humor rather than conventional warfare. It's turning out to be a surprisingly effective career path. The galaxy has learned an important lesson. Humans may have the highest aggression index in galactic records, but our aggression takes forms that no one else had ever imagined. We don't just fight harder, we fight weirder. And in a universe full of logical, predictable species, weird might just be the ultimate advantage. So the next time someone asks you, what happened when humanity faced its first alien invasion, you can tell them the truth. We sent them memes. They sent us confused military transmissions, and somehow everyone ended up friends. It probably won't make sense to them, but that's okay. Making sense is overrated anyway. After all, in a galaxy full of people taking themselves too seriously, someone has to be the species that defeats invasions with cat pictures. Apparently that's us. And you know what, I'm okay with that.